It was supposed to be a normal house. That's what Daniel kept telling himself the day he moved into the old farmhouse on the edge of town. The property had been listed for months, priced lower than anything else in the county. The real estate agent had laughed nervously when Daniel asked why. She said people preferred newer homes, modern insulation, better wiring. She did not mention the attic. Daniel was starting over after a divorce. He wanted quiet. He wanted space. The farmhouse offered both. It stood alone beyond a stretch of empty fields. Its white paint faded to a sickly gray. The porch sagged slightly in the middle. The windows on the second floor looked like tired eyes. The attic entrance was in the hallway ceiling. A square wooden hatch with a pull string. Daniel noticed it on the first day but ignored it. He had enough to unpack. The first night was silent except for wind brushing the dry grass outside. Daniel lay awake in the unfamiliar bedroom listening to the house settle. Around 2 a.m, he heard a faint dragging sound above him. Slow, heavy, like furniture being moved across wood. He sat up and held his breath. The sound stopped. He waited for another minute, then lay back down. Old houses made noises. That was normal. He repeated that thought until sleep finally came. The next evening, the dragging sound returned. This time it was followed by 3 distinct knocks directly above his ceiling. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel grabbed a broom and stepped into the hallway. He stared at the attic hatch. It was closed. Dust lined the edges undisturbed. He told himself it was an animal. A raccoon, maybe. The farmhouse was surrounded by trees. It made sense. The following morning, he bought a flashlight and a small metal ladder. He waited until afternoon, when the sun was bright and steady, before pulling the attic hatch down. A ladder unfolded slowly with a dry creak. A rush of stale air spilled into the hallway. It smelled like mold and something faintly rotten. Daniel climbed up. The attic was larger than he expected. The roof beams stretched high above him. Thin slivers of sunlight slipped through cracks in the wood. Old furniture was stacked near one wall. A broken rocking chair, a wooden trunk, several cardboard boxes. He moved carefully across the floorboards. They groaned under his weight. Near the center of the attic, he noticed deep scratch marks carved into the wood. Long parallel lines as if something sharp had been dragged back and forth repeatedly. The scratches formed a rough circle about 6 feet wide. In the middle of the circle sat a single wooden chair facing the far wall. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He walked around the chair slowly. The wood beneath it was darker than the rest of the floor. Stained. He forced himself to crouch and examine it. The stain was old, brown and black. He did not need a lab test to guess what it might have been. A sudden thud came from the far corner of the attic. Daniel jerked upright and swung the flashlight toward the sound. Nothing, just boxes stacked haphazardly. His heart pounded in his ears. He scanned the attic once more before climbing, down quickly and slamming the hatch shut. That night the knocking returned. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. Daniel stared at the ceiling and whispered, "Stop." The knocking continued. Over the next week, the sounds grew worse. Dragging. Knocking. Sometimes what sounded like slow footsteps pacing directly above him. He decided to install a small security camera in the attic. If it was an animal, he would catch it on video. If it was something else, he would have proof. He set the camera up facing the circle of scratches and the wooden chair. The first night he reviewed the footage on his laptop. Hours of still darkness passed on the screen. Dust particles drifted through the air. Nothing unusual. At exactly 2:17 a.m. the chair moved. It did not tip or wobble. It slid smoothly about 2 feet to the left as if pushed by invisible hands. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. The camera flickered briefly. When the image stabilized, the chair was back in its original position. He replayed the clip several times. The movement was real. The next night he stayed awake in bed holding his phone. At 2:16 a.m. the dragging began. Slow and deliberate. At 2:17 a.m. the knocking started. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Daniel rushed into the hallway and yanked the attic hatch open. The ladder crashed down. He climbed up without thinking. The attic was pitch dark except for his flashlight beam. The chair was no longer in the circle. It was positioned directly above the hatch opening. Facing down toward him, Daniel froze on the ladder. A whisper floated through the attic. Faint but clear. "Daniel." He nearly fell backward. No one knew he was up there. He lived alone. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away. The whisper came again. "Daniel." It sounded like a woman's voice. Soft, almost pleading. He forced himself to climb the rest of the way into the attic. His hands trembled violently. The chair creaked. Daniel turned the flashlight toward it. No one was sitting there, but the seat cushion was indented as if someone invisible rested upon it. The air grew colder. His breath became visible in thin white clouds. The whisper shifted into a low murmur. words he could not understand. Suddenly, the attic hatch slammed shut beneath him. The ladder snapped upward, folding back into the ceiling. Daniel screamed and lunged toward the hatch, but it would not budge. The whispering grew louder, surrounding him, pressing against his ears. He spun around wildly. In the far corner of the attic, a shape began to form in the darkness. At first it looked like a trick of the light, then it grew clearer. A woman stood there. Her head hung at an unnatural angle. Her long hair covered her face. Her white dress was stained dark around the chest. Daniel stumbled backward until he hit the wooden chair. The woman lifted her head slowly. Her face was pale and stretched tight over sharp bones. Her eyes were hollow black pits. "You left me here," she said. Daniel shook his head frantically. "I don't know you." Her mouth widened unnaturally, stretching almost to her ears. "You locked me away." The temperature dropped further. Frost began forming on the beams. Daniel remembered the real estate agent mentioning that the house had been owned by one family for generations. The last owner had died alone. He swallowed hard. "I just moved in." The woman took a step forward. Her movements were jerky, as if her joints were broken. "You hear me every night," she whispered. The scratch circle on the floor began to glow faintly. The air filled with the smell of iron. Daniel's mind raced. If the hatch had closed on its own, maybe it could open on its own. He lunged toward it again, pulling with all his strength. Behind him, the woman screamed, a sound so piercing it felt like his skull would split. The chair slammed into his back, knocking him flat onto the floor. He rolled over just as the woman dropped to all fours and crawled toward him at impossible speed, her limbs bent in wrong directions, snapping with each movement. Daniel kicked at her desperately. His foot passed through her body as if she were smoke. Her face hovered inches from his. "Stay with me," she hissed. The hatch suddenly burst open. The ladder crashed down, hitting the floor hard. Daniel scrambled toward it. The woman shrieked, grabbing at his ankle. Her grip felt like ice. He kicked free and slid down the ladder, falling onto the hallway floor. He slammed the hatch shut above him. For a moment, everything was silent. Then 3 slow knocks echoed from above. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel did not sleep that night. At sunrise, he packed his essentials and drove away. 2 days later, a local news article appeared online. The headline mentioned human remains discovered in the attic of an abandoned farmhouse after a fire broke out due to faulty wiring. Daniel stared at the photo. It was his house. According to the report, the remains belonged to a woman reported missing 20 years earlier. She had been the daughter of the previous owner. Police believed she had been locked in the attic and left to die. Daniel read the final line twice. Neighbors had often reported hearing knocking, sounds coming from the attic late at night. The article ended there. But Daniel knew one thing the article did not mention. When he left the house that morning, he heard a whisper from the hallway ceiling, "Thank you." Maya never liked visiting her grandmother's Victorian home in the woods, outside of town. The place felt frozen in time. Heavy curtains blocked most of the sunlight. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. Every step on the staircase produced a long, aching creak. Her grandmother insisted the house had character. Maya felt it had something else. During summer break, Maya's parents decided she would spend 2 weeks there while they traveled overseas. She protested, but it was useless. On the first night, her grandmother showed her to the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor. "And do not go into the attic," her grandmother added, casually while tucking in the sheets. Maya frowned. "Why not?" "It is not safe. The floorboards are weak." Maya nodded, though curiosity sparked instantly in her chest. The attic door was at the end of the upstairs hallway. Unlike a normal hatch, this one was a full wooden door with a rusted brass handle. A small padlock hung from a metal latch. That night, Maya lay awake, listening to branches scrape against the house. Around midnight, she heard something else. Soft humming. It drifted down the hallway. A childlike tune sung slightly off-key. Maya sat up slowly. The humming continued, faint but steady. She stepped into the hallway. The air felt heavier outside her room. The humming was coming from the attic door. Maya approached it carefully. The padlock hung loose and open. Her heart pounded. She was certain her grandmother had locked it earlier. The humming stopped abruptly. Maya stood frozen, staring at the door. Then she heard a giggle from the other side. She ran back to her room and locked the door. The next morning, she asked her grandmother if anyone else was staying in the house. "Of course not," her grandmother replied without looking up from her tea. "Did you unlock the attic last night?" Maya asked. Her grandmother's hand paused mid-air. "I told you not to go near it," she said sharply. "I didn't," Maya insisted. "It was just open." Her grandmother's eyes darkened. "It stays locked." That evening, Maya decided to prove to herself that she was imagining things. She waited until her grandmother fell asleep, then crept into the hallway. The attic door was closed. The padlock was secured. She exhaled in relief. As she turned away, the humming started again. Right behind her, Maya spun around. The padlock swung gently as if recently touched. The door creaked open slowly, revealing darkness beyond. A cool draft brushed against her face, carrying a faint smell of old perfume. She stepped inside before she could lose her nerve. The attic was spacious but cluttered with antique furniture and covered mirrors. A single bare light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting dim yellow light. In the center of the room sat a small wooden cradle. It rocked gently back and forth on its own. Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. "Hello," she whispered. The rocking stopped. Silence pressed in around her. Then a small voice answered from inside the cradle. "Mama!" Maya's breath caught. She stepped closer and looked down into the cradle. It was empty, but the mattress was indented as if something invisible lay there. "Mama," the voice repeated louder this time. Maya backed away, shaking her head. "I'm not your mama." The temperature in the attic dropped suddenly. From the far wall, one of the covered mirrors toppled forward, smashing onto the floor. Maya screamed. In the shards of broken glass, she saw a reflection that was not her own. A little girl stood behind her. The girl wore an old-fashioned dress with a large bow in her hair. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Dark bruises circled her neck. Maya turned around slowly. The attic was empty. When she looked back at the glass, the girl was closer. Tears streamed down the girl's cheeks, leaving dark trails. "Why did you leave me?" the girl whispered. Maya shook uncontrollably. "I don't know you." The girl's expression twisted into rage. "You promised." The attic door slammed shut. The light bulb flickered violently. Maya ran toward the door, pulling at the handle, but it would not open. Behind her, the cradle began rocking furiously, banging against the floor. The little girl's laughter filled the attic, echoing off the beams. Maya covered her ears, screaming for her grandmother. A crying child, hands wrapping around a small throat. Maya's stomach dropped. "You killed me," the girl said calmly, now standing directly in front of her. Up close, Maya could see deep purple fingerprints embedded in the child's neck. "It was an accident," the girl continued, mimicking an older voice. "You would not stop crying." Maya realized the voice belonged to her grandmother. The attic began to shake violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. The girl reached out, touching Maya's arm. Her fingers felt like ice water. "Stay with me," she whispered. The door suddenly burst open. Her grandmother stood there, pale and trembling. "Get away from her," she screamed at the empty air. The little girl hissed, revealing rows of sharp teeth before vanishing. The attic fell silent. Her grandmother dragged Maya downstairs, locking the attic behind them. The next morning, Maya woke to the smell of smoke. She rushed into the hallway to find flames licking down from the ceiling. The attic was on fire. Her grandmother stood at the bottom of the stairs, holding a box of matches, tears streaming down her face. "I should have done this years ago," she whispered. The fire department arrived too late to save the upper floor. After the flames were extinguished, investigators discovered small human remains hidden beneath the attic floorboards. The report claimed the child had died decades earlier due to accidental strangulation. Maya never returned to that house, but sometimes late at night, she still hears soft humming drifting through her bedroom, and a small voice whispering, "Mama." Ethan and Lucas were urban explorers who documented abandoned buildings for their online channel. When they received dozens of messages about an old mansion known as Blackridge Manor, they could not resist. The mansion stood on a hill overlooking the outskirts of town, surrounded by iron fencing and overgrown vines. Windows were shattered. The roof sagged in several places. Local legends claimed the original owner had gone insane and sealed himself inside the attic for years. Ethan laughed at the stories as they set up their cameras one chilly October evening. "This is perfect," he said, grinning at the lens. They forced open the front door and stepped into darkness. Dust coated every surface. Cobwebs hung like curtains. Their flashlights cut narrow paths through the gloom. After exploring the ground floor, they made their way upstairs. At the end of a long hallway, they found a narrow staircase leading up to the attic. "You ready?" Lucas asked. Ethan nodded. They climbed carefully, each step groaning under their weight. The attic door at the top was slightly ajar. Ethan pushed it open slowly. The smell hit them first, damp and metallic. The attic was enormous, spanning the entire width of the mansion. Old paintings lined the walls, their faces slashed beyond recognition. In the center of the room stood a large wooden wardrobe. It seemed oddly untouched compared to the rest of the attic. Lucas circled it with his camera. "This is creepy," he muttered. Ethan stepped forward and pulled the wardrobe door open. Inside hung dozens of identical black suits covered in dust. At the back of the wardrobe was another door, a small one barely 3 feet high. Ethan exchanged a glance with Lucas. "Hidden room," he whispered excitedly. He crouched and opened the small door. A narrow tunnel extended into darkness. They hesitated only briefly before crawling inside. The tunnel led to a cramped hidden chamber within the attic walls. The chamber was lined with photographs, hundreds of them. Each photo showed a different person standing in front of Blackridge Manor. Some photos were decades old. Others looked recent. Lucas felt his stomach tighten. "These are missing people," he said quietly, recognizing faces from local news reports. In the center of the chamber sat a wooden desk with a single journal resting on top. Ethan opened it. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting. "They are watching from the attic. I must keep them contained. The knocking will not stop." He sealed himself up here to protect them. Lucas swallowed hard. Protect who? A loud slam echoed behind them. The small tunnel door had shut. Ethan crawled back toward it, but it would not open. They were trapped inside the hidden chamber. From the main attic space, they heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps circling the wardrobe. "Someone is up there," Lucas whispered. Ethan shone his flashlight around the chamber. In the far corner, he noticed a small vent leading into the attic. He pressed his eye against it. Through the slats, he saw a figure standing in the center of the attic. A tall man wearing a black suit. His head was tilted unnaturally to one side. His face was pale and expressionless. The man began knocking on the wardrobe door. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks again. Ethan's blood ran cold. The knocking grew louder. The wardrobe doors burst open. The figure stepped inside. The chamber plunged into darkness as their flashlights flickered out simultaneously. In the pitch black, Ethan felt something cold brush against his cheek. A whisper filled the cramped space. "You should not have opened it," Lucas screamed as unseen hands grabbed his legs, dragging him backward. Ethan lunged blindly, reaching for his friend, but grasped only empty air. Lucas's screams echoed, then cut off abruptly. Ethan scrambled toward where he last heard him. His hands touched the wall. Wet, sticky. He smelled fresh blood. The darkness felt alive, pressing in from all sides. A faint light appeared as the small tunnel door creaked open again. Ethan did not hesitate. He crawled out of the chamber into the main attic, gasping for air. The wardrobe stood open, empty. Lucas was gone. The attic was silent. Ethan stumbled toward the staircase but froze when he noticed something on the wall. A new photograph, pinned among the others. It showed Ethan and Lucas standing in front of Blackridge Manor earlier that evening. Lucas's face had been scratched out. Footsteps echoed behind him. Ethan turned slowly. The tall man in the black suit stood at the top of the stairs, blocking his path. Up close, Ethan could see that the man's skin was stretched, too tightly over his skull. His eyes were completely white. "You are part of the collection now," the man said softly. Ethan ran toward the opposite end of the attic, searching for another exit. The attic door at the staircase slammed shut, trapping him inside. The knocking began again. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. They came from inside the walls, all around him. The paintings on the walls began to shake violently before falling to the floor, revealing dozens of small doors. Hidden behind them, each door began rattling as something inside tried to get out. Ethan screamed for help, but his voice was drowned out by the relentless knocking. The tall man approached slowly. "We keep them here," he said calmly. The small doors burst open simultaneously. Pale hands reached out from every opening, grabbing at the air. Faces pressed against the gaps, eyes wide with terror. Ethan felt hands seize his arms and legs, dragging him toward one of the open compartments. He clawed at the floorboard, splinters digging into his skin. "Please," he begged. The tall man tilted his head further until it nearly snapped. The knocking stopped abruptly. Everything fell silent. The next morning, hikers passing by Blackridge Manor noticed the front door standing open. Police searched the property after reports of a missing local videographer. They found abandoned camera equipment in the attic and a single new photograph pinned neatly to the wall. It showed Ethan screaming as pale hands dragged him into darkness. The wardrobe stood closed behind him. From inside it, faint knocking could still be heard. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 knocks. No one has entered the attic of Blackridge Manor since. But if you stand outside on a quiet night and listen carefully, you might hear it too. Knock, knock, knock.